don't want anybody to waste any time. So, this is the sixth of our law student discussion groups. What you can do with your law degree. We're going to focus on the nonprofit and academic side of things. Kathryn here, if anybody doesn't know, this is Kathryn Ellis of the Knoxville Family Justice Center. She went to UT College of Law and got her license in 2010. We were supposed to have Akram, who is at LMU Duncan School of Law. Again, if there's any LMU students in here, please try to let us know what's going on with Akram. But he got his law degree from Notre Dame and was licensed in 2001. I think these guys have done all kinds of stuff that I think they would be able to shed some good light on. If anybody has any questions in the meantime, please put them in the chat. We'll try to get going and obviously address those. So Kathryn, I guess to start out, just kind of give us kind of a rundown on kind of your kind of career path. I know you went to law school a little later than usual, and kind of what led you to that, where you were at when you got out of law school, and then the path that's kind of led you to where you're at now.
Okay, so a very long story short, because I was in college for 19 years. I did a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD, and then I went to law school. And the only thing I can say related to that is don't do it. There's absolutely no reason to do all of that. I tell people, some people react and say, oh, you've got to be so smart because you've got all those degrees. And my response is, no, I just couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. So I was the not so smart person who stayed in school for too long. When I went to law school, I was literally finishing my PhD in history. My very first semester of law school was my last semester of my PhD. So I was dual enrolled. I had my 15 credits of law school, and then I had 6 credits of dissertation hours at the graduate school. And this, Georgia, is sort of why the library was so foreign to me when I was in law school. I would get up in the morning, go to class. I would spend basically 9 to 5 or 9 to whatever for my last class at the law school. I would attend class. I would read in between classes, however much I could. Then I would leave. I would go home and I would work on writing chapters of my dissertation. And then I would send whatever my most recent draft was to my dissertation director. I'd go to bed, I'd get up the next morning, I'd go to law school, I'd go home, I'd get whatever he had sent me back as far as edits. And I wrote my final 3 chapters during my first semester of law school. I defended it the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, which made it possible for me to start my final exams like the Monday or Tuesday after Thanksgiving. The only special request I made that semester, other than can I take more credits than I'm supposed to, the only special request I made was I took my criminal law exam on a different date because it was the same day as my PhD hooding ceremony. So I moved my criminal law exam so that I could go to my hooding ceremony. And then second semester, I actually knew what it was like to be a law student. My plan in my life all along was do something to help people. And my PhD is basically on discrimination law. It's on African Americans. It's on the US Supreme Court's influence on the evolution of Jim Crow between Reconstruction and World War I. So looking at, how laws changed, how the language in the Supreme Court decision sort of gave cues to white legislatures about what they could and could not get away with, and how you could see certain types of legislation sort of moving across the South. So that was what I was studying in history, and I was like, I'm going to go to law school. So I went into law school fully planning to help people, which I am sure 80% of you, your classmates, everybody at the first week of law school, why are you here? Well, I want to make a difference. I want to help people. The reality is most people, when you graduate from law school, you need to actually earn some money. And, you know, there's only so many help people jobs out there. When I was in law school, I clerked for 1 semester with Hodges, Dowdy, and Carson. I clerked, or I interned, I don't really know how he called it. I worked for a summer with Judge Tipton of the Court of Criminal Appeals. And then I started working, clerking for a small plaintiff's firm, where we represented people who were filing for, you know, personal injury cases. But a lot of it was not really it is med mal, but it wasn't med mal. It wrongful death type situations. And the firm had a very niche specialty in EEOICPA claims, which is energy employee, I haven't had to say this for a long time, energy employees occupational injury compensation act, I think. I left a letter out somewhere. Basically, people who worked at Oak Ridge, for around here, it was Oak Ridge, people who worked at Oak Ridge, back when nobody told you what you were working around because it was classified, and nobody told you about or knew about the dangers. And so a lot of them are now retired, and they have various cancers. And a big one is beryllium disease is another thing. So we would go and take these cases because there was an act that was passed that would allow them to get health care and allow them to do everything. That was kind of like the gimme part. What we started doing was filing workers' comp claims. And Leitner Williams was the firm that mostly defended. We would file workers' comp claims, and they would be like, this dude's 75. He found out about his cancer 25 years ago. He's been retired for 20 years. How does this even, like, how do you think this is a workers' comp claim? And we would say, because until he went to one of the EEOICPA panel doctors, he had never been told that his cancer was likely related to what he was exposed to when working for you. And workers' comp, it's 1 year from when you knew or should have known. And how can he know? Because they didn't tell him what he was working around. So we started doing those. And my fun job was I wrote all the appellate briefs. Everything that we lost, I got to appeal. 2 years of writing appellate briefs for me was like soul sucking. I just could not do it anymore. So I left, and not knowing what I was going to do, I started volunteering for Legal Aid of East Tennessee once a week on Thursdays down in Knox County for Orders of Protection Court. Had no clue what I was doing, had never done an order of protection, and did that for about a month, and a job opening came up and I applied, and they were like, yeah, she's been volunteering, let's hire her. So that was the next 8 years of my life, a little bit more than 8 years. And I worked at Legal Aid of East Tennessee, and Georgia can actually back me up on this. Order of Protection Court like makes me happy, which is so not normal, but I loved going and basically representing people who are being abused, who are disadvantaged for at least one reason, but usually multiple reasons, and who are used to not having a voice and not having a say. And it was like, I just loved it. There's a lot of people who go into domestic violence work who burn out, completely understandable. And I was like, can I go to court more? Can I go to court more? At one point I was handling orders of protection only for 6 counties, and it was awesome. Then I got promoted, which is sometimes good. And I became pro bono director. And I started recruiting interns and working with law clerks and recruiting attorneys and working with the KBA. And my job really shifted to convince everybody else who really just wants to make money that they're going to love doing what they do for free to help people. And I did that for 5 years. And that was awesome. And as of 5 months ago, 5 months and like 9 days, I then moved over here and I became the executive director at the Knoxville Family Justice Center, which means I'm sort of responsible for making sure that all of the agencies here, which is law enforcement, legal, social work, all of it, that we focus on what's best for the victims of domestic violence, that we work well together, and that we, make sure that we're doing best practices and that we're doing everything we can to help victims of domestic violence, to make sure the community knows about the problems of domestic violence. So I'm not going to court now, but I do a lot of talks and a lot of outreach and a lot of telling people about all the good that's done here. And that's kind of awesome too. So I'd never had an actual plan other than I'm going to help people. And this is where I landed. And right now it's perfect. 5 years, maybe I'll go somewhere else. I don't know. But so, for me, it really was I knew I wanted to help people, and that's just, I just had to get there and figure out how. That was a actually long answer. Sorry.
No, you're good.
But Akram's not here. So
got to eat up the time, right? So that was great. I didn't know a lot of that history, but especially the tackling, a dissertation and a law school in the same semester. That's crazy. But
it was not smart.
Yeah, I guess the question I would have is, looking back on your time at the beginning, the beginnings of law school, when you're just basically, I just want to help people. Looking back on where you're at now, would you have maybe, just speaking to the students who may be in the same kind of headset, would you have done anything differently? Would you have maybe done some things that could have prepared you for the roles that you have now while you were in law school, or maybe getting ready to graduate, or stuff like that? Can you speak to anything like that?
Personally, no, I would not have probably changed anything if I went back. So when I went, I had been an academic advisor. I had been an adjunct professor. So I had worked on like both sides. I'd been in the classroom and I had been the teacher, like I was the student teacher. So by the time I went to law school, I was very much of I'm going to take what I want to take, because I know, as somebody who advised people for 5 years, that yeah, sure, there's classes that are recommended and there's classes that are, this would be a good choice. But the bottom line is, when you graduate and you get your first job, 95% of the time, the classes you took make no difference. What unfortunately makes a difference 95% of the time for the first job is, what's your GPA? Because that's what people look at. And the best way to have your best GPA is to take the classes you like and to take the things you care about. So when I was in law school, I definitely was not going to do the transactional track. It's just not me. Now that I'm like in charge of budgets and stuff, maybe I should have, but it's not something I was going to do. But the advocacy track was like so, it was so restrictive. Like, you have to do this, this, and this. So I would sit down and go, well, on the transaction track, contract drafting seems like something that pretty much every attorney should be able to do. So I'll take contract drafting. And I was like, but this disability law class, I don't know if I'll ever work with people who are disabled, but that looks really cool and I get to write a paper. So I took that. Internet law? Sure, why not? So I took, as far as like transactional, I took intro to business transactions. I took commercial law, and that was awful. And I took contract drafting. And then I took evidence and trial practice. And then I took a bunch of I took 2 IP related classes. I took 2 employment related classes. I took 2 criminal procedure classes. So I had a little bit of everything. But for me, what that was doing was, I think it was my goal as far as class selection. One, I was taking things I cared about, things that I knew I wouldn't just kind of zone out. I would actually get the higher grades. And two, I didn't think I wanted to work at big firm. That I was pretty sure of, because that's just not my culture. And, small firms, most of them handle a little bit of everything. So if you have a little bit of employment law and you have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, it will hopefully help prepare better than all transactional or all advocacy. So I really focused on what am I going to enjoy and went from there. I was definitely not top of my class. I was not number one. I did an employment law moot court. I never tried to write on for law review or anything, which people were like, oh, but you're so good at research, you should do that. And my response was, my dissertation involves blue booking. If anybody wants to see whether or not I can blue book, I'll send them my dissertation. I didn't want to do it. So, and I still got a job. I still got hired. So there are things that people say, you got to do this. But the bottom line is there's so many people graduating from law school that when you come out, they're looking at numbers, and, or a lot of them are. And the best way to improve your numbers is to do what you enjoy and to not overextend yourself.
Great.
So that is my advice.
Great. We have a student question here. So how does East Tennessee compare to other areas in terms of providing access to legal services to marginalized communities, and what improvements would you like to see moving forward?
Okay. So there's kind of two parts there. As far as how we compare for providing access to legal services, every single county in the United States is, at least to some extent, represented by a legal services corporation funded agency. Here in Tennessee, Legal Aid of East Tennessee does 26 counties in the East. Legal Aid of Middle Tennessee and the Cumberlands does the big chunk of the middle of the state. And then there's West Tennessee Legal Services that covers like Jackson and not Memphis, but north of Memphis, up against the border. And then there's Memphis Area Legal Services. So every county in the state of Tennessee is covered by one of those four agencies. Every state has one or more agencies that cover every county. So theoretically, everybody should be getting coverage. The problem is that Legal Services Corporation funding is not enough to pay attorneys and paralegals and advocates and everybody else, pay enough of them to cover the need. At Legal Aid of East Tennessee, we were able to assist either through advice or representation approximately, I think at the time I was there, I think it was 4 to 5% of all people in our coverage area who qualified for our services. So, I mean, that's nothing, it's a drop. So that's what Legal Services does as far as the official Legal Services Corporation funds. And then you get into, different groups, the ACLU, and you get into, groups that will do small business work, that will do race issues, that will do gender issues. And so then a lot of those are centered in larger areas. Southern Poverty Law Center, they do a lot of good work, but they also are isolated and limited. So typically in cities, you're going to have somewhat better coverage for marginalized communities. The more rural areas you get, the harder it actually is to get good representation. Yeah, and I can say with Legal Aid of East Tennessee, there were, I think, 11 offices when I left that include Family Justice Center offices, but they were primarily, it was Johnson City, Morristown, Knoxville, Cleveland, Chattanooga. Those were the main areas. Well, the Knoxville office covered Loudoun, Blunt, and Sevier. But when all the attorneys are in Knoxville and there's too many cases, then Loudoun is not getting as much coverage as Knoxville is. It's just not. So there's huge gaps, and rural is an area that needs a lot of help. I'm on the Tennessee Bar Association's Access to Justice Committee, and at one point I was chair of the pro bono subcommittee. And one thing we talked about trying to implement, because you've got, I mean, hundreds, probably thousands, I'm sure Jonathan knows from the directory, thousands of lawyers in the Knoxville area. And then you go to Loudoun County and there's like 4. So to get those 4 to do all the need that in Loudoun County, it's impossible. First of all, they're going to have conflicts. It's just impossible. So one of the things we talked about on the TBA committee was trying to get what we call justice buses, getting where you rent a bus, you get all the law students on board, and you say, okay, on the way out, we're going to talk about what we're doing today. We're going to talk about a clinic. We're going to talk about intakes. We're going to talk about your responsibilities. Go have a clinic, have all these people from the rural counties show up. Also have attorneys go with you from the city, get there and do a big clinic for the people who live in the rural counties, and then hop on the bus on the way back and give the law students some reasonable beverages and, make sure nobody does too much of anything, but have fun and play some music and make it into like an all day thing, but take the volume of people from the city to the rural counties. There's all sorts of, logistical issues with that. And, but, so that's one thought but one of the things that Tennessee and probably the whole country really needs to do is figure out how to get those services to the rural communities more. We're pretty good, relatively speaking, with the funding we have about cities. I can give people referrals all over the place here in Knoxville. But then if I have to give a referral in Cock County, I'm like, I got 2 names and one of them represents the other party. So I got 1 name. So that's one of the big problems for marginalized communities. Great.
To speak to that, there are roughly something like 2,300 attorneys in Knoxville, and I get some. Sometimes we get lists of the surrounding counties from the BPR, and she's not joking. There's literally some counties have 10 attorneys in the entire county, and that's wild. So that's great. We have another student question here. So are the justice buses something that you all managed to put into place ever, or was it just an idea that floated? Sounds like a great idea. So can you speak to that?
At this point, it's still just in the floated area. I will say that in some ways, not justice bus, but in some ways, taking the numbers to the rural counties, Joy Radice and the expungement clinic have done a really good job with that. They've done expungement clinics here in Knox County, but the very first one, I cannot remember which county it was in, but it was like north of us. Georgia, do you know?
There was one. Yeah, there was one this year too. That was.
Yeah, there was one this year in Roan, like 3 years ago. There was one that was further east and north. I don't remember what it was. Tyler Sims, I know, went to that one. And then they've done Monroe County. So, that has been a model that they've been able to take to some of the rural counties. It's very specific. It's, criminal law and expungement. But even that, though, is, huge, because for low income folks, one of the huge barriers is if you don't have a driver's license and you can't get to work, you can't get work. And you also can't, if you can't get work, you can't pay your child support. If you can't pay your child support, you're not going to get your visitation. If you can't get work, you can't pay your rent. If you get evicted, you don't have an address and you can't have visitation with your kids. It's like, it's a waterfall effect. If you have something on your record, it really doesn't need to be there. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize, hopefully you guys sort of do, is that when somebody goes and runs your criminal report, it might be like a 10-page report, but 8 of those pages are a charge. It was dismissed. It's not a report of your convictions. It's a report of charges. And when you get pulled over, for example, for a DUI, you get a charge of DUI. You get a charge of probably failing to agree to the breathalyzer. You get a charge of not having your insurance card with you. You may get 3 to 6 charges from one incident, and all of it gets dismissed. But somebody, an employer or a landlord who's running your criminal report, prints it and sees 10 pages and is like, nope, not even going there. So the expungement clinics, one of the best part about it is most of the time they're not actually they're not expunging convictions. They're not expunging things that need to be on the report so that people are aware. They're cleaning it up. And it is amazing the difference in reactions from employers and landlords. If you see a 1-page report and the most recent conviction is 15 years ago, that's very different than a 10 or more page report. So those expungement clinics that are actually happening kind of all over the state. Amber Floyd with the TBA Young Lawyers Division has really started a lot of that in the other parts of the state, and then Joy and the clinics here. So that's something that is taking the volume of attorneys and law students from the cities out to the rural counties that makes a huge difference for those communities.
It's a bummer that, during COVID, throwing people onto a bus is not really a likely thing to be happening anytime soon either. Of course, it doesn't have to be a bus. So, people could carpool, but yeah. So I guess let's say I'm hoping that there's at least somebody here that was maybe in the same boat as you and is just like, I just want to help people. So let's say that someone does want to work in the, for maybe legal aid or the Justice Center or maybe other legal resources in the nonprofit area. What are the best ways to find job opportunities in those fields, and what do those employers look for?
One of the best ways to kind of get in is to do a law clerk internship, externship, whatever. It's going to be unpaid. It's just the reality. It's nonprofits. We don't have money. But if you're able to be there, something that I think, and having been briefly at least a private attorney and now in legal services, the caseload is completely different. I, at times when I was doing orders of protection, and divorces for domestic violence. I would often have probably 80 in process order of protection cases, 20 or 30 divorce cases. If you go to a private law firm and say something about divorce cases, they're not handling 20 or 30 at a time. They're certainly not doing it in 6 different counties without a paralegal or assistant dedicated to them, which is what legal aid attorneys are doing. At one point, we had people go on maternity leave, and I was doing my load of orders of protection and divorces. I was handling Knox County detainer cases, which are the evictions. I was covering some evictions and additional like consumer stuff for Blount County, Loudoun County, and Sevier County. And at the time we had a contract with DCS where we were supposed to be sending an attorney to Mountain View Detention Center, because if they have legal issues that are not related to their criminal, then they have legal rights. So I was going to Mountain View once a week. So that was 2 people were on maternity leave, and I was doing both of their jobs and my job. I did not have a paralegal assigned to me. So the thing that saved me at any given time was law clerks. And, it's having a law clerk there. They can, help with the phone calls. They can do all sorts of things. And one thing that I tell people is being a law clerk someplace like legal aid is very different than being a law clerk at Baker Donaldson, Leitner Williams. A law clerk at legal aid, you're going to have direct client contact because you're going to be making phone calls. You're going to be doing interviews. You're going to be helping them to fill out forms. You're going to be drafting letters. You're going to be drafting motion. You're going to be like doing all of this hands-on work. You're going to be going to court. You're going to be doing everything. You're not going to be 90% of the time. You're not going to be sitting in the firm library doing research for a memo. Georgia was not in law school yet, but she interned with us, and she, got latched on to our senior attorney, our Title III, who was the person who did all of the work for seniors over the age of 60 who lived in Knox County. And I mean, Georgia was working her butt off every day because it's nonstop. But she also got a ton of experience and exposure to things that you're not going to get interning or clerking at a private firm. And it's the best way to figure out if you really actually do want to do it. There are people who come in, this is what I'm going to do with my life. Oh my God, yeah. And by the end of the summer, they're like, I can't take it, not doing it. And that's fine. It's not for everybody. And then there's some people who, are doing it as an externship for credit, and, they're just going to do their minimum 100 hours and here's my schedule. And, oh, I don't really do this kind, but, I'll do whatever you guys tell me, but I'm here for my hours and I'm out. And by the end of the summer, they're like, can I come back in the fall? I'll volunteer. I don't need credit. You don't always know until you've done it. And if you've done it, if you have interned at Legal Aid of East Tennessee, and then you go back home to Memphis and you want to work at MALS, Memphis Area Legal Services, and they see that you clerked at Legal Aid, they'll call us and they'll be like, are they good? Yes, they're good. And it's just like the private bar network, but it's the legal services network. So being there and showing up and getting the experience is the absolute best way. When we would post positions for hire and we would get applications, we weren't looking at GPA. I mean, we don't want you to be at the very, very bottom, but it's not ultimately the only thing. One of the first things that all of us would look at is there anything on this resume that shows us this is what they want to do? If you've never done it, if you've never volunteered at a clinic, you've never, done anything pro bono, all of that, if you've not done it, then we're probably not going to say, oh yeah, they want a low paying position with an over the top caseload and no assistance. This is definitely what they want in their life. Because if you do want it, you will have already done it. So that is what we look for.
Great. So you spoke to this earlier, how you were just an insanely busy person in law school. So let's say, and your advice was don't do it, which is very understandable. But let's say that there are students who just either can't get out of it or want to work while they're in law school or whatever it may be. Do you have any advice for organizing their time? Just how to get through it with mental health still available, I guess, at the end of the day.
The don't do it is don't spend 19 years in college and don't do dissertation and law school at the same time. That's that. So when I was in law school, after the dissertation was done, I was in law school. I had an assistantship on the main campus with the Chancellor's Commission for Women. That was a 20-hour-a-week requirement. Paid my tuition though. I clerked or volunteered. I did stuff like that. And my husband and I were running a small business, selling supplies to knife makers and blacksmiths, totally random, that often had me at the shop packaging things for many, many, many hours. I had a lot going on, but it's because I had to pay bills. I mean, that's the bottom line. And I'm assuming you guys still have to get approval if you're a 1L in particular to work while in law school. At least we used to have to. It was an ABA requirement that if you wanted to have a job during your 1L year, you had to get approval from the dean of students. Basically, I think that this person is capable of doing this without flunking out. And I would go and get my approval, and they were always like, yeah, we know you, you're going to be fine. Don't go ahead. The most important thing for me, and that I think is the most important thing for the sanity, is when you've got that much going on, you're never going to finish everything perfectly. If you're in law school, you're probably some level of type A personality. You want to do it all, Georgia. And it's okay when you don't. You have to give yourself the ability to say, you know what? I would love to proofread this paper 3 more times and spend another 3 hours editing it, but it is what it is, and I'm turning it in. And, with your work and everything, it's this, I mean, you can't get fired because you need the job, but it's okay to not be number one. It's okay to miss a class because you really do need 2 more hours of sleep because you've been burning the candle on both ends. And you're an adult. I think it's really hard sometimes for law students who have gone straight through. So like you graduate from high school, you went to college, and you went go to law school. And even in undergrad, there's a certain level of professors kind of walking you through everything. Hey, you didn't turn things in yet. Is there something going on? Can I help you? And, so you get to law school and you kind of expect a little bit of that. And you also are you feel like everything is spelled out and you have to do everything the way it is. But the bottom line is you're an adult. Make your decisions. Give yourself some leeway and don't beat yourself up. My grandfather, who's no longer with us, but his 100th birthday is tomorrow. And when we get done with this, my husband and I are going to get strawberry sundaes because we get strawberry sundaes every year for Grump's birthday. And his is the only family picture I have sitting on my desk. So my Grump he was everything to me. And he was an educator. He taught vocational education. Graham, his wife, taught for 50 years. They were both educators. And my whole life, the one thing that Grump consistently told me was, because I was all about beating myself up for not doing the best and not making the right decision and all of that because I'm type A. The one thing he taught me over and over again is when you need to make a decision, and that can be a decision about which assignment am I going to do tonight because I can't do both, or which class am I going to take, whatever level decision it is. When you need to make a decision, you look at everything you know now, and you make the best decision you can with the information you have now. And then you do it. And if tomorrow you get a lot more information, you never tell yourself, I made a bad decision, because you made the best decision you could make at the time you made it with the information you had. When you get the new information, you may have a need to make a new decision based on your new information. But don't ever tell yourself that you made a bad decision, because you did the best you could with what you had. And if I wasn't talking to you guys, I would tear up right now, because I love my girl. But so, and it's something that really, he's right. I mean, you decide tonight that you've got time for your crim law, but not for your torts. You go in tomorrow and you end up having like some sort of pop assignment in torts, so be it. You can't do everything all the time, so you do the best you can. All of us are gonna make a decision that later needs to be changed, but you did the best you could. And that's all anybody can ask of any of us. And so you shouldn't expect more from yourself.
It's great advice from Grumps for sure.
Yes.
Kind of speaking to that a little bit more on the work-life balance side of things. So you're in a field that's obviously super serious and super chaotic. Do you feel like you have a good work-life balance, and what tips would you have for students who are worried about that aspect of practicing law?
So everybody who knows me would say, no, I do not have a good work-life
That's why
balance.
I was snickering a little bit while I was asking you, but yeah.
Yeah, everybody would say I don't, because I mean, I'm kind of working like all the time. I do after-hour things with students. I do mock trial judging. I do all of it. But what I have to explain most often to my husband is what I'm doing, I love so much that it's not, for me right now, it is not always work. So, I am definitely not the best person to be like, oh yeah, let's do meditation and let's go to yoga and let's do, but I also, when I get home, and this drives my husband crazy, we'll go out somewhere for dinner and we'll get home and it's late and he's like, let's get ready for bed. And I'm like, no, I haven't had my downtime yet. He's like, we were just out for 3 hours and you haven't been working. And I said, but that was not my downtime. My downtime is, I don't care what time I got home. I sit down on the couch, I turn on the TV, I watch something completely stupid, not important, that I really don't care that much about. And my cat jumps up and we snuggle. And I'm like, I need at least an hour of my downtime. So every night I watch something stupid on television. I watch The Masked Singer. I watch The Masked Dancer. I watch, name a TV show and I've probably watched it, because it's just my way of like getting out of my head. The cat is critical. Cat has to be there. But yet everybody thinks I work too much. But most of what I'm doing, it's because I want to do it. So again, I think it's ultimately every individual. If somebody forced me to go do meditation, I would probably be thoroughly stressed out by like being told to sit there and be quiet and listen to the music and not move, and my head would be racing. When I turn on the mindless television, my head's not racing. So you've got to figure out yourself. And the other thing, which sometimes sounds really, really bad, but even because of what I do, I am a strong believer that you have to find things at work that you just laugh about. And, representing victims of domestic violence, it's tough. But there are times where things they say and things they want you to do or stories are just funny. And it's okay to be like, I mean, I had a case once where the other attorney and I spent almost an hour talking about a cat. And I was like, well, we got to make sure the cat's okay. And it was like, the cat needed to stay at the house and the victim needed to go to shelter. And so somebody needed to come take care of the cat, but the order said that the guy couldn't go to the house. So we're like, well, once she's in shelter, you tell us, and then we'll tell that person, and then that person can tell him, and he can go and be, and we worked it all out. And then 3 weeks later, we show up at court, our person has been in shelter, and they're like, well, you never called us. I'm like, wait, yes, we did. The message never got through. And we're like, is the cat dead? And we spent more time talking about, okay, can a cat survive? You know, like, and it turned into a conversation. Somebody was like, well, of course the cat can survive. They'll just drink out of the toilet. I'm like, what are you talking about? How can they get into the toilet to drink? And they're like, well, you just jump up on the edge. I'm like, are you serious? You leave the top of your toilet down all the time? And yeah, of course I do. And I'm like, well, you're gross. You're supposed to put your seat, like the whole thing down. And like, we spent forever, and we were doing this while we sent somebody to the house to find the cat. The cat was alive. But I mean, like, sometimes you just have to it's okay to, even with really, really serious things, to be like, seriously, you leave the lid of your toilet up, you know, what's wrong with you? And it's okay.
Through the
And
day,
that
right?
makes it doable. So, but I will tell you, if you're ever listing your house for sale and you send me photos or something, like you think I'll be interested, if all of your photos have the seat up on the toilet, I'm not interested, because I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with these people. Why do you think I want to see inside the toilet to buy your house? So, but that's me.
You sounded resonating like my mom when I was growing up, for sure. I guess we're about out of time. So again, thanks for doing this, Kathryn. I know you had to kind of hold your own here, but I guess I'll let you, I kind of just want you to give your spiel, since this was your job at one point. Why should a student that is, you know, obviously going to have bills and stuff, and all these different options moving forward, why should they choose kind of the service side of things that you've been on as opposed to other areas of law?
Again, first of all, there's no wrong choice. It's what is best for you. And I guess it's kind of the work-life balance thing. I mean, the bottom line is, if you're not happy, so let's say you go, and I'm just naming big firm. If you go to Baker Donaldson because you want to earn the money, but you hate the work you're doing, it's not going to matter how much money you're earning. If you go to legal aid and you're like, oh, I'm going to help people, but you hate the work you're doing, you know, it's not going to matter that you're helping people. You have to find the work that you want to do. And law students, a lot of us, when I was there, and a lot of you all, you know, people come in with their sort of, I'm going to be a district attorney. I'm going to do transactional law. I'm going to do civil rights law. Don't lock yourself in, because until you've done it, you don't know if that's what you want. And so, you know, I have friends who, I'm going to do advocacy track. I love advocacy. And now they're transactional lawyers, and they're like, I really wish I had taken business administration. Is that the right class? I think that's right. I did not take it. And then there's people who are like, oh, I'm going to do criminal law. And now they're doing estate planning. And they're like, I wish I had taken this. You're never going to have taken every class that you need for whatever job you're doing. So don't worry about that. You may change your position and what you actually practice 3 or 4 times. Don't worry about it. Your money, I mean, you got to pay the bills, but at the same time, as our clients have proven, you don't have to have a lot to make it. You can make it on a lot less money than any of us really think is possible. If you're not happy, it's not going to matter. So focus on figuring out what you want and know that it is okay to change your mind. And it's okay to not have the new leased car every 3 years or whatever.
Yeah, new iPhone every year, right?
Oh my God, yeah. Not happening.
Great advice for any field for that matter. So thanks, Kathryn, for that. Again, thank you all for coming. That'll do it for us today. I'm going to get these. I'm going to be sending the students all an email tomorrow, so look out for that. I'll have links to all these that we've done so far on YouTube. I think we may end up doing this again in the fall. So if you're still around, look out for that. We may have some different attorneys on to speak to different things. But again, thanks for joining us. If you've been to multiple of these, thank you for that as well. And Kathryn, thank you so much for first. I know it's not like you to speak about yourself for an hour, but yeah, thanks so much for doing this. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, Kathryn, before we go, can you type your email into the chat real quick? And if anybody,
I was just about to do it.
I
yes.
always forget. And a student called me out like 3 discussion groups ago, like halfway through, and I was glad about that. And I still keep forgetting. So if anybody has any questions for Kathryn, I would she's definitely somebody who knows what's going on around Knoxville. So reach out to her. So Kathryn, thanks so much again, though. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.